along comes Jack, who is this kind of like lower class, free man who can do whatever he wants to, whenever he wants to. And what's interesting is as you watch these scenes, he kind of like slowly allows her to be herself. She wants to throw herself off the boat, right? That's how they effectively first meet because she feels so constrained. But so he meets her where she's at. She initially has these like knee-jerk reactions to what he says, like, "Oh, that's not proper. That's uncouth. That's rude." And then afterwards, she says, "You probably just think I'm some spoiled rich girl." And he said, "No, that's not what I was thinking. What I was thinking was, what pushed you to like get to the point where you felt like that was your only way out?" And she feels seen. And you see throughout, the rest of the movie, it's just him kind of taking her as she is and allowing her to be herself. So the question is that seems, unless you have pushback, is that the kind of knowledge we're talking about? He knew her in that way and then allowed herself to get to know herself.
Okay, I can't take it anymore. I can't take it over here. Can't take it. Look, Jack, based, on this description, he's a good person. The fact that he's non-judgmental and open, it's wonderful. That doesn't mean that he knows her. He's open to, you could be whoever you want to be, right? Maybe he's a sensitive person. So he's like, oh, there's more here than just a prissy rich girl. Okay, that doesn't mean he knows her, right? Let me give you the scene. 30 years from now, they're married.
This is the Dilemmas on Screen, a Jewish perspective podcast, where we take ambiguous moral situations in fictional popular movies and TV shows and analyze them from a Torah lens. Rabbi Bilek, thank you for joining us on this podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just as quick note to the viewers. It's a pleasure. It's our first time having Rabbi Raffi Bilek. He lives in Baltimore with his family, with his wife and 4 kids, his 4 daughters, and he's a licensed social worker. He's a marriage counselor. He's been guiding and counseling couples for the past 10 years or longer. How long has it been? 10 years or more?
Let's see. We're looking at, 17 years of practice, but I opened up my own practice in 2014. So we're looking at going on 12 years now, doing my own thing.
Wow, that's great. And you're also the author of the Couples Communication Handbook. So you've got a lot of experience in the couples therapy and, guiding marriages through, say, some rough patches and really helping them repair and reconnect.
Yeah, done a lot of that.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so I think you're a great guest to have for this episode because Titanic, Jack and Rose, perhaps the most famous romance love story in the past. I don't know, certainly in my lifetime. It was a huge hit back then. It's still relevant. People talk about it and people definitely debate about it. And just as some background, so the first question I want to address is, do we believe in love at first sight? That's obviously kind of a main theme in this love story. And I want to get to that in just a moment because the next question we'll be handling after that is where I think the central moral dilemma comes up, where the tension is. And that is, and it's funny because I saw it when I was 10 years old, saw it in theaters. The 90s were a different time, I guess.
Yeah, they sure were.
I saw my 8-year-old sister. I remember we were both sobbing at the end of the movie. It was and I remember the theater was packed. I remember leaving, we had to walk a few blocks to even get to my mom down down the street. It was completely pitch dark. It was whatever, crazy times. But I definitely remember seeing it. I remember, you're so caught up in their love story, right? Jack and Rose, it's so tragic. Jack dies.
Wait, what? I hadn't seen the end yet.
Spoiler. Sorry. But yeah, so Jack dies. And so the tension comes at the end of the movie when you see, so Rose tells her whole story that she's over 100 years old. And after she finishes the story, she kind of lies back down in her bed. You see this kind of panoramic view of her, of these photos of her, I guess as she aged after the Titanic disaster. And then you see this scene of her kind of going back into the Titanic as young Rose and seeing Jack. And it's ambiguous in terms of what that scene is. Is it a dream? Is it a fantasy? Did she die? And this is her vision of the afterlife. So I understand, before fans, again, start piling on, I understand it's ambiguous, but we'll go for the sake of this podcast with the understanding, because I do think that that's a fairly broad understanding that she died. And now her vision of the afterlife is her kind of reuniting with Jack and exchanging this passionate kiss. So why is it so controversial? It seems beautiful, a really nice conclusion. It's such a heartwarming, it's very tragic. It's so sad. But if you look at what people say, and I hadn't thought of this, again, as a 10-year-old, because I was 10 years old, was Rose got married, had kids, had grandchildren, and, and her granddaughter is actually listening to to Rose tell the story when she's 100 years old, telling it to the people who are exploring the Titanic. And what gets people very distraught and frustrated and potentially even angry is the fact that Rose got married, apparently spent decades, 40, 50, 60 years with this man, had children, grandchildren, raised a family together, grew together. And at the end of this, the person she fantasizes about at the end of her life is a guy she knew for 2 to 3 days on the Titanic. It's just mind-blowing. And then you see people are defending Rose. Like, you have to understand. Great. That's the dilemma that we want to get to eventually. But the first question is, do we believe in love at first sight? And just as a fair qualifier, it doesn't seem like Rose had the love at first sight. Like, she sees Jack and like, she's like, okay. But when you see Jack sees Rose, he's clearly smitten with it, by her. Like, his friends are kind of waving their hands in front of his face. They're like, joking around with him. And he's clearly like, wow, like, look at this perfect angel. So that's where the love at first sight comes in. But now backing up, I think that's a fair amount of background. Does Judaism believe in this concept of love at first sight? Is that a thing in a Torah? What's the Torah perspective on this? Let's hear it.
Well, let's understand. The Torah very much accepts and values the human emotion and the emotional state that we have. Emotions are a really powerful and important part of the human being. That's really what gets us to do anything. People sometimes think that, like, oh, if I'm really convinced of an important idea, that intellectually I will then go and follow up on that. And the reality is that most of what we do is because we feel strongly about it. And we have an emotional push to do that. So emotions have a really important place in Judaism and the Torah worldview. That said, it's not the only thing. So the fact that you feel something doesn't necessarily mean that that is the way to go, the reality. And psychology acknowledges this as well. There's a cognitive error that this comes from cognitive behavioral therapy called emotional reasoning, which is, if I feel it, it must be true. And this applies in different areas. If I feel angry at you, you must have done something wrong. If I feel afraid, there must be a danger. Those are not necessarily true. People sometimes feel afraid and there's nothing to be afraid of, right? That's called an anxiety disorder. So the fact that I feel loving feelings, or I am excited about this person, or I feel a connection, does not mean that I am in love with them. Now, right, so that doesn't prove or disprove anything, but the very fact of those emotions, they're useful, but they don't necessarily mean this is the be-all and end-all. And so I think you see also in Torah sources that love is something that we build, right? There's a line not from Torah that says love is a verb. Yeah, love is something you do. You build it, you work on it. Marriage is supposed to be a lifelong thing that is always growing. And so the idea that I would see someone and then love them in the sense of there's a deep connection and a long-term relationship that has already begun, I don't think we have a source for that in Torah. I don't think that's the way that human beings actually work, because Torah really is describing the fabric of the universe, and it's not just a list of rules. And so as much as these feelings are real and genuine, that doesn't mean that you can see somebody and be in love with them at first sight.
Yeah, that's interesting. So like love is a verb. I haven't heard that before, but that is a very helpful tool, I guess. If someone to push back, I guess two things. What would you call that emotion when, Jack first sees Rose? That's one. And two, what would you describe, what is love? I guess that's, before we even talk about do we believe in love at first sight, probably the first step is, what is love?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that. Yeah, I was afraid you were going to ask me that. Okay. Let me also preface this one with the idea that we can only talk in the words that we have available to us. Language is a poor conveyor of emotions. We have a bunch of words we can use. I saw a metaphor once, which I wish I could remember where I saw it. And the person said that trying to describe emotions in words is like putting on a thick oven mitt and reaching down into a deep well and trying to pick out a very small precious jewel. It's a very gross and blunt tool, language, for the emotions we feel. So trying to describe what it is and trying to define love is already a fraught endeavor. It's difficult. I had thought, in preparation of this, I fearing that you might ask me to define love, I decided I'm going to beg off. And I'm not a philosopher, I'm a therapist and a marriage counselor, and I help people with tachlis, meaning, getting somewhere, getting practical results. So for the purpose of our discussion, I think it might help people more if we talked about, okay, what is a good idea for you to do? When people come to me for marriage counseling, they don't say, you know what, we're not sure we know what love is, right, honey? Right, yeah, we're not sure we know what love is, but we'd like to figure that out. Could you help us? Like, I can refer you to some of my friends who enjoy philosophy, but let's talk about, love at first sight or a long-term relationship or whatever, aspect we're talking about or emotion. What should people do? You go out there and you think, okay, well, there's love at first sight. So if I see this person, I love them automatically. I know this is the right one. Is that a good idea? Or, how should I find love? Is love at first sight a thing? Do I have to keep meeting people till it clicks? Or is there something more I can do? So I would love to talk to you and your viewers about things that are practical to you rather than trying to figure out, well, what does it really mean? Right? We all have some sense, love, there's a connection there. I want to be with you. I'm going to leave it at that. And I want to talk about what will help people figure out, what do I do in my life? Because after all, that's what Torah is about, is what is good for you to do in your life and how do you get to be the best version of you and the best version of your life.
Okay, that's fair. I'll give you a pass for now.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll give you a pass for now. But yeah, let's see. I guess. Well, hang on. Would you rephrase my question then? Because the question was, does Judaism believe in love at first sight? How would you then? Because if we're not defining love, then how would you approach that question? Because now I'm not entirely sure.
So let's run with the idea that we all have a basic sense of what love is. I want to connect with you. I want to be with you. I'm attracted to you. We enjoy each other. We value each other. I don't want to get granular because, first of all, it's not my strength. And second of all, we could spend hours talking about that and maybe not bring any value to the people who need an answer. So what's the question? Does Judaism believe in love at first sight? I think it's a fair question. Can we see somebody and, in an instant know that this is the person for me, that this is the person I want to spend my life with and devote myself to? Can we know that? And while we have agreed already that there can be a powerful feeling and that feeling means something, I don't think that is love in the sense that if you see somebody and you feel that feeling, that is a sign that this relationship will work and you should spend the rest of your life with them and you should jump over obstacles and whatever you need to make sure that you can be with this person because that's the person for you. I don't think that is a Torah idea and I don't think that exists in reality.
Okay, so I guess the next question is why not?
Great question. Because love is, like we said, it's a verb. It is something that you build. It is something that you have to develop. There are many people who have gotten into relationships because it felt good or it made sense or whatever it is. And then some years down the road, and let me tell you, this is what I deal with every day. Some years down the road, it's not feeling great anymore. So is it that the love just departed? Are we at the whims of, some little, baby in a diaper with a bow and arrow who's like shooting at people like, oh, I guess I got hit by Cupid's arrow. Oh, I guess oh, well, we're out of love. I'm sorry. I fell out of love with you. I know we've been together 30 years and we have 7 children and, a mortgage together, but I fell out of love. Nothing I could do about it. Right. I don't think that is a way to perceive life. Life is our internal worlds are in our control. Obviously, there's plenty that's not in our control. But if I'm going to be married to you, now, Ophir, I'm not going to be married to you, just so we're clear, okay? Let's say I was married to you. I would want to make sure that I do what I can to keep that vibrant, vital, loving, fresh. And there are things that we can do. It is in our power to keep a relationship going, to keep it meaningful. And if it weren't in our power, boy, we'd be up a creek. And if we were just, relegated to finding the person, the one, it would be a tough life. Like, what if my one is some lady who lives in Serbia and doesn't speak English? Like, that'd be a real problem for me. Right. So the reality is there's a wide range of people that you can make a relationship with, that you can develop and build love with and have a really happy life, relationship, and marriage with that person.
That's powerful. And it is a little alarming to think. I mean, I remember when I was backpacking when I was 23 years old and I was in France and I was couch surfing back in the day. And
how's your French, Ophir? Good?
It is good. It was definitely much better back then. Yeah. Oh, actually, sorry. As another intro, so both me and Rabbi Bilek grew up in Montreal. That was a really cool connection to find. Went to the same schools.
Yep. I would say the same thing. My French was a lot better back then.
Yeah. So the same when people are like outraged when they're like, "Wait, you grew up in Montreal and your French isn't perfect." I was like, "I'm an Anglophone. Let's just
Anglophone, right? That's not even a word in America, by the way. Anglophone.
Yeah, I'll be like, I'm an Anglo, and people are like, what? And I was like, oh, okay, let me explain. My mother tongue is English. Yeah. So, my mother tongue is English. My dad is Israeli. English, Hebrew, and then French. But when I was in France, which was cool because I got to use my French, so I was couch surfing. I remember this one guy I was who hosted me. It was again like really nice guy, hosted me. He was just did a great job. Took me. He got like tickets to like the um, the preliminary show of like an opera. So I got to see an opera in Orange, France, which was like in an old like Roman amphitheater. So that was very cool.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I remember this guy is because I can't remember if he self-described as a romantic, and I think he may even put this on his couch surfing profile. And then he said, he's like, and then I met a girl who was like, I was like, struck, smitten with, and I left my wife and kid to be with this woman. And
Yikes!
Right. And that didn't work out. Now, I remember like, right. Now, if you're like, describing it as like, oh, I felt like, it was love at first sight. I saw I was completely, I don't think you'd have to be a particularly wise individual to be like, that's not a good idea. Whatever you think you fell into, fell out of it now.
Right.
Like, don't proceed down this path. So I think we could definitely go into that. But I guess, so you're saying how this is something that you build, that there are multiple people you can have connection with. My question then, I think, just to, fair pushback, I think that makes a lot of sense. But doesn't Judaism believe in this concept of a beshert, that there is someone who you're like destined to be with? So what about that? Can you like, is that love at first sight as soon as you meet them, or is that anyone can be your beshert? Or is it just, I think I've heard one interesting response, but I first want to, push this on to you. What do you say to that?
Yeah, you're talking about the piece of Talmud that says that 40 days before a person is born, a voice calls out from heaven saying, the daughter of so-and-so is for so-and-so, and there's a match made in heaven. And when you see that, so you think that when you see them, it's fireworks, whatever it is. Well, the Talmud there says there's a name called out, and that's about as far as it goes. It does not say that when you meet this person, you will suddenly have fireworks, you will see pink, and like there'll be a hazy glow around you. It doesn't say that you must marry that person. There is such a concept. Beshert is a Yiddish word. I don't know where the concept originally comes from, but it's not a classical Jewish source. And plus, there are plenty of very big people throughout Jewish history that have had more than one wife. So what does that mean? Was the first one the wrong one or the second one the wrong? Yes, there's an idea in some level that there are people who were set up to go together. But again, there's a range of people. Look, there were people who had multiple wives. We don't really do that anymore, nor does Judaism see that as the ideal. But it's more complex than you were destined for this person and, hit or miss. Because again, if my person, some lady in Serbia who doesn't speak English, oh, well, sorry, Raffi, good luck. I think it's more nuanced and complex than that. And I don't think that we are all stuck with one person who's going to be the person for us.
Right. I also remember hearing it being described as, by Rav Aaron Lopiansky. He's the Rosh Yeshiva in Greater Washington, actually close to you, close to Baltimore. I remember he was talking about Pesher. I don't remember why, but he said, he was, that Talmudic term, lemai nafkamina, which means like, what do I take out of this in terms of how am I supposed to know who my Beshert is, who the Talmud, who the heavenly voices cried out? I have no way of knowing. And if you have no way of knowing, then stop worrying about it because you have no way of knowing. It's impossible to test out. So you make responsible decisions. And I guess that kind of brings us back in. So, okay, so it seems like we don't believe in love at first sight. That seems to be pretty decisive. Is that fair?
I think it's fair. I don't think you can look at somebody and have a feeling that is a good guide for the rest of your life, that this is the person you're supposed to be with. That's not a thing that we have in Judaism.
Right, that's fair. And so I guess before we move on to the next question, I just want to make sure we're fleshing this out, is what would you describe that? When people, it seems like this is a pretty common, probably before I got into Torah, I probably would have said, yeah, I can see that. Like, I don't know if I've ever experienced it, but I could definitely see how there is such a thing as love at first sight. So what is that? Why do people get confused by that?
Sure, yeah. So again, we are limited by language, but there are words such as infatuation or obsession that might do the trick. It's exciting. You feel emotionally and physically drawn to this person, and all your systems are like, wow, this is great, and it's very exciting. There's dopamine, there's all these things that feels good. And we in this society have called that love, right? Every song, maybe like 80% of songs on the radio talk about love. And we're going way back. When I was a kid, one of my favorite songs was Can't Hurry Love by the Supremes, right? Gotta find someone to love. You can love somebody. And like, these are people who are barely out of teenagers themselves, talking to teenagers. Yeah, like we think that love is this exciting feeling where you see this girl, you see the guy, and it's like, oh, that's what that's not love. It's exciting, it's infatuation, and again, it's meaningful. There's an emotion there. It's not something that you should just discard, right? That's a part of who we are, and yet it's not a good guide to making long-term decisions. And again, that's where I'm coming from. Where when it comes to love, I'd like to help people make good decisions and get into relationships and keep relationships that are wonderful in their lives. And that initial feeling, not a good guide to that. Not.
Does it serve a purpose? Like, should that be there though before a person makes a long-term decision? Or when you meet a girl, you'd be like, look, there's no excitement, but I think it's a responsible decision. That sounds kind of cold, but
Yeah, I don't think there's a rule that has to apply to all people. I've heard it said that the experience of infatuation at the beginning of the relationship is what God has done to get people into the relationship, right? Because if we didn't have that, the prospect of sitting down and hashing out, does this make sense for us? And thinking all the way down 70 years down the road, how's this going to plan out? It'd be really tough. So that excitement at the beginning of a relationship is deliberate, it's planned, it's supposed to be there, it's good, it helps us lift things off the ground. Newsflash, relationships are hard, going to take some work, right? So getting excited about it at the beginning is a great idea. It's wonderful. It doesn't have to be there. If it is there, it's not wrong. But again, that is separate from the experience of love, which should last the lifetime, right? Again, this idea that this excitement is love, I don't think that's accurate, right? All the movies, all the music that says I'm in love with you are my true love, and the idea of true love, like that's just not realistic for people to live their lives by.
that you just reminded me of this idea I heard from Rabbi Tatz, which he articulated a very similar idea that he said like, it's a gift given for free. There's like two stages in a relationship. There's that first super exciting phase that you effectively get for free. Then there's the work stage, and which is when that kind of perhaps that excitement kind of wears away. And then, but the thing is, the goal is after those 50 years, to have worked your way back up to that level of excitement you first got for free.
Absolutely. It's a big Rabbi Tatz idea. It's good that you brought that. I love that perspective, right? It's going to be work. You should know it's going to be work. All of you people who are in relationships or not in relationships, it's going to be work, and that's normal. I see online sometimes people saying things like, oh, yeah, if your relationship is work, you're in the wrong relationship. And I go, oh, no, oh, God. It's terrible. That's a terrible way to look at things. It's going to be work. It should be work. Anything that's valuable takes work. Who just falls into things and it's effort? Like, lottery winners are among the most miserable people on the planet. It doesn't work for them, right? Things that just come out of the blue and take no work do not bring value to people's lives.
Right. That is. And I do know that there's like a lot of flack. I mean, not that this person is a particularly great example, but I do remember that Aish actually picked it up. And speaking, I know the Oscars were just recently, I think 10 or maybe 15 years back, Ben Affleck, when he was accepting some award at the Oscars, was like, he was talking about his marriage to Jennifer Garner at the time. I don't think they're still together, but he said, he's like, like marriage is like, it's a wonderful thing. It's a lot of work, but it's like, it's really wonderful. And he was apparently like lambasted in the media for saying that. Be like, marriage is work. How could you say such a thing? And Aish picked it up and they're like, he was right. He was 100% correct. Like, marriage is work. It sounds, like so unexciting, but movies are 2 hours long.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, folks, marriage is boring. Marriage is boring. This love at first sight thing is very exciting. That's not marriage, and that's not long-term relationships. Marriage is boring. It's wonderful. It's deep. There's so much there, but it is not often exciting. Sometimes exciting. Sometimes it's exciting. We'll go on a roller coaster together. That's exciting. Love is not, the long-term, deep, secure love is not the same thing as excitement or infatuation.
Yeah, I actually heard when I was in my first 5 years of marriage in like Chicago, they had this like this marriage vow, this like marriage work group where they took young couples or like young men and young husbands and were guiding them. And I remember one of the first things the rabbi said was, we don't believe that. He's like, what's the foundation of a marriage? Obviously people would say love, and he's like, it's not love, it's commitment to the relationship. Commitment to the relationship, because you can fall into and out of love with your wife. There will be times where you do not feel that love and you're still committed, and that's what's going to help build that love. I'm still not entirely sure I understand what love is. I mean, again, no, I don't think there's any married couple who's like, do I love my wife? I don't think that's what's keeping people up at night. But like, So I still don't get it. Like, what is love? Okay, so marriage is boring. You're not going to have these fireworks throughout your, necessarily at all times in your marriage. There's a commitment. There's, you said a deep, secure. Do you say so? You said deep, secure love. What was that? Was that?
I can't remember the words I used. Roll back the tapes. I don't know.
Yeah. Yes, but like, what happens after all these years? Like, what are you feeling, or what should you feel? Should you not feel anything? I can't imagine that's the response. You should definitely feel affection for your wife.
Sure,
like,
yes.
So I guess that I just want to hone in on that before we move on. I have more questions about the the Jack and Kate question, but before we do, I feel like I'm still not entirely clear on. Okay, so marriage is work. Marriage requires commitment. This love fireworks. So don't go chasing that could land you into a huge amount of trouble. It's useful at the beginning as a tool, but then what? It just dissipates? It just becomes like...
Let's discuss what marriage looks like if done right. I'm going to do what you don't want me to do and dodge the question again, but I'll give you something useful that I think will help. What does it look like if you get there? If you get to a place that I would call real love, what does it look like? In a marriage, you feel comfortable. You feel safe. You feel cherished and valued, and you value somebody else. You feel that there's something important here. You feel secure. You don't think that things are going to run away from you. You don't wonder whether the other person has doubts or fears. And if they do, you have confidence that you can deal with them. So it is a wonderful place to be because you don't worry about what's going to be in the future of this relationship. You don't get thrown by the normal conflicts that everybody has. I fight with my wife, but I know that we're going to fix it. We don't tear each other apart. We disagree. We get annoyed. We get angry at each other. We have full confidence we're going to repair that. So being in a marriage, again, it's not like a roller coaster. It's like thrills and wonderful, but it's so valuable. It's such an important part of a person's life to have a relationship they can depend on 100%. So all those things go into love. You want me to define what that one word is? Again, we'd have to spend a lot of time dissecting and philosophizing, and I'm not good at it. I help people get to that place of security and confidence and comfort and fulfillment.
So I guess, truth is, that's beautiful. I have two comments. One, I probably maybe spend a little too much time on Reddit, but I do find it interesting. I went on Reddit to see what do people say. Like the debates, the dilemmas I try to present on this podcast are ones that I want people to actually, like, I don't bring, is murder wrong? That's okay. I think we could,
yes,
figure that.
I'll take that one next.
Right. That's it. Right. It's easy. I want things, and this Jack and Kate thing, like that debate in terms of her fantasy at the end of her life, that's one of them. People get real into it. But one thing I remember seeing in Reddit was like, what do you appreciate now that you didn't appreciate before? Or maybe it was a relationship question. And one thing that a lot of people said was, I used to think it'd be really cool to go with like, the really like super good looking, like really cool, like crazy, like exciting. And they're like, I'm so over it. Like now I love the fact that it's stable, it's normal, it's boring. I can count on my spouse. I know they're going to be home at night. Even if they have to go for a week on a work trip, I can count on them. They're reliable. So that is a thing. It's kind of interesting. It requires a certain maturation process to realize that like things that are exciting when you're 18 are not exciting when you're 45 years old and have to pay off a mortgage and get the kids to school and deal with real issues in terms of any issues that might be coming again in school with their friends groups. Either, if there's bullying, maybe they're being bullied, they are the bully. Like, how does that work? It's just trying to address all those things. You want someone who's there and committed. But my question is, that makes sense. How is that different than a friendship? If I can ask, like, I understand there's more to it. Like, this is the person you're intimate and live with and raising your children with. But like, is marriage just a friendship? Is that all it is? I can't imagine that's true. But like, what would you say if I was like, oh, so it just sounds like a really great friendship? Is that it?
When you and another person combine your lives in such a way that you make a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts, right? I have friends and we're close and we share a lot of things together. But with my wife, I'm building something. We're building a life together. We are creating kids. We are raising the next generation with a certain set of values. And so marriage has a greater purpose. Right? The Bible says, therefore shall a man leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife, meaning there's a directionality here. We're going somewhere. The Torah also talks about friendships. That's important. It's a component of someone's life. But the marriage is your life. You are building something greater than yourselves. And that involves the intellectual connection, the emotional connection, and the physical connection, right? And most people are not having physical connections in that way with their friends. And, there are young people who do that, friends with benefits and so on and so forth. That is a weakening of the value and power of these things rather than adding more to it. So there's certainly a uniqueness to a marriage that doesn't exist by a friendship.
Cool. That's a beautiful response.
Nailed it. Okay, come on, next one. Next one.
Let's go. Okay, cool. So I think I have a good sense in terms of what it's, I guess, supposed to look like. What you're building. But I guess my question is, then how do you build that? If we can't rely on love at first sight, then how do you build it? How do you find that? How do you make the choice to do that? Now I'm effectively just relying on my own choices, which is certainly empowering, but it's a little scary because if I could do it with A, then I could do it with B or with C. Who am I?
Yes. Okay, good. So where we've come to now is a great point, because now we realize, wait a second, I can do this. How do I do it means there's something for me to do. It's not just, I run into the right person and then we're golden, right? That's a lottery, and that's not a great way to run your life, is hope that you find the right person. By the same token, you don't just randomly pick a person and say, okay, here are the tasks to do, and then you and I will be married, we'll have a great time. So it's a balance between the intellect and the emotions, right? When most Orthodox Jewish people go out on dating for marriage, they have a sense of who they're looking for. I would like somebody who is really committed to X, or somebody who sees their life as being Y. So you narrow down the field a little bit, and you meet with somebody. You find a person who fits, and you decide, okay, we are going to build together. And building love looks like a couple things. So first of all, to love somebody, you must know them. This is one of the main reasons why love at first sight doesn't make sense. You don't know the person. You're projecting onto them all these things that you want and wish and think, but it's not real. When Jack sees Rose, does he know if she's an activist, or if she is prone to emotional fits, or if she likes tiddlywinks? What? He doesn't know anything about her. He thinks that he projects all these ideas onto her. But the Rambam Maimonides says, what is love? And he's talking about loving God. He says, if you want to love God, then you have to know God. The more that you understand Him, the more that you look in and research and learn Torah, and you understand God, the more you can love Him. Because there's a commandment to love God. How can God command you to love somebody? How can God command love if that's just an emotional thing that you run into someone and you love? And the answer is the more that you know someone, the more you can love them. Right? I know my wife real well, and I know what she likes and what she doesn't. I know her strengths and her weaknesses, and I love her deeply. And the more you know somebody, the more you come to love them. And so learning about each other, John Gottman is one of the top guys in marriage. He did huge marriage research over the past decades. And so he has a concept called love maps, where you learn the internal map of your partner, right? Knowing somebody and their internal world is a deep form of love and connection, and you build it that way. So that's one really important aspect of love.
So you just reminded me of this. This is totally, excuse the reference to a different fictional work, but I remember it was a favorite, was Ender's Game. So,
it's great.
Yeah, phenomenal. So spoilers ahead. If you don't hear spoilers, might want to watch out. But I remember in Ender's Game, so he's this military genius, right? He's I guess when we first meet him, he's 6 years old. And then as the novel progresses, he's 11 or 12. And he's effectively this military genius who they're looking to destroy, the buggers, this alien race that's presumably trying to destroy humanity. And he's very good at what he does. And the way he effectively beats all of his opponents is he gets to know them. And I remember I remember this having such a beautiful idea was the tragedy of Ender is at the moment he comes to really know and understand his enemy and his opponent, which is when he can destroy them, because he then understands exactly what he needs to do to destroy them. He can predict their movements, etc. That's when he comes to love them. That's the conflict he has. As soon as he comes to know them, he loves them, but he has to destroy them because these people are threatening humanity. And I remember being so moved at that, wow, this guy understands a person so deeply that he then feels, because he's it's as if he is him. You could be I know what makes this guy or this person tick.
Yeah.
I get them. I see them. I understand them. And then, of course, yeah, he destroys them, which he's not happy about. It's, because otherwise he might be a sociopath. But but I remember. So it seems like, because at first it just sounded like intellectual. Like, I just need to know you. Like, why don't you tell me you could write an essay, and then once I get to understand you, that just sounds a little cold. I can't imagine that's what you're saying. That can't be what the Rambam is saying.
Right. So what's the difference between intellectual knowledge and a deeper emotional connection? It's a good question. I think the combination of trying to sort of join with somebody in that intimate way, plus the knowledge, right? You could study somebody really well in order to assassinate them. And that is cold intellect. But when you join that with a sense of, I want to be with you, I want to love you, I want to connect, I want to spend a lifetime together, that knowledge deepens it beyond just fleeting feelings.
Powerful. I actually remember hearing the that famous Torah mitzvah of "Ahavta l'reacha kamocha." You should love your neighbor as yourself. I think this is also Rabbi Tatz, as you can tell. I like to quote him a lot, but he said the mistake in thinking "and you should love your neighbor as yourself." It's when you think of like I'm A, he's B, and I love B like I love A. That's not what it means. What it means is your I has expanded enough that the other person is now encompassed in your own sense of self in terms of you identify as that person. Like with me and my wife, if something hurts her, it hurts me too, because we're like almost the same person. Like we've effectively fused into one. Like for something to like hurt her is like, oh my gosh, I understand so deeply what this must mean to you, and it crushes me too because of that connection. Is that what you mean? Like that kind of knowledge?
Sure. Right, that's deep empathy, right? Like it may not bother me that XYZ happened, but if it bothers you, I can empathize, I can connect to that. Right? It's really understanding who you are. You might be thinking of the story with Rav Aryeh Levine, where he and his wife walk into the hospital and he says to the doctor, my wife's leg hurts us. Right? There's a sense of deep identification that what's part of you is part of me.
Right. Yeah,
and this is, of course, why, the Torah, when it talks about intimate connection, right? When it says that Adam knew his wife, right? We think that like, oh, the Bible is being a little bit, wants to use a euphemism, doesn't want to say the real thing. Like, no, that's it. Like knowledge, das, vayeda, Adam es chava ishto. Knowledge is that intimate connection. That's the primary meaning of das, is intimate connection. And then, the idea that there's an intellectual connection, that's a secondary meaning. That's also Rabbi Tatz, by the way. But Vayeda, to know somebody, is that deepest level of connection. It's not just like, oh, I know when your birthday is. Like, that's one part of it. But to really know who you are and what makes you tick and why and how, that's connection.
Yeah, that's powerful. So I guess, how do you build that? Is it just by talking to somebody, sharing enough experiences together? Is that like, then is that what the Rambam says? Like, you want to build love? Get to know your wife. That's what's going to do it. That it?
That's certainly a part of it. The other part of it is this consistent, ongoing push towards each other, right? So the Rav Dessler has a very famous approach, which is that the word ahava, love, in Hebrew, actually comes from a different root. The word hav means to give. Ahava is I am giving to you. Ahava is about giving, right? It's not about, sometimes we think like, oh, if someone brings me flowers and chocolates, like, oh, I'm going to feel loving towards them. That's a much shallower level of love. Like, I like what you got me. But the deeper level is when I give to you, not that brings me more into it, because I'm giving a part of myself. If I give you flowers and chocolates, that's wonderful. I feel loving towards you. When I give of myself to you, when I bring myself and I say, here's my vulnerabilities, here's who I am, and I'm going to gift you with this. So now, like you said, I identify with you. You're part of me, right? What greater love is there than the love of a parent for a child? Do you get anything for your children? Not much. Maybe some nachas. Let me tell you, it's a long time till you get to the nachas. Okay, you spend a lot of time giving to your children, and yet most parents would take a bullet for their children because you've given yourself into them. They are a part of you. Like you said, you expand your identification with who's out there. And so when I give to my wife and I give all of me, that's building the love.
Is it true that there's the knowledge, the way you perhaps start identifying with another person and really kind of expanding your sense of self into that other person is by giving of yourself?
So of course, these concepts, of course, they all overlap. It's not like, we have silos here of do this and do this. It's all together, right? You have to give to your wife. You have to give to your spouse. You give to them. If you're only about taking, right? If people are only getting married, like, what do I get out of this? It's not going to work very well. I'm giving to you. You're giving to me. Again, Ophir, we're not actually married. It's for the purpose of his example. You understand. I give to you and you give to me, and we become one in that way. And so there's that intimate connection. And the more that I give to you, the more you know me, and the more you give to me, I know you. And so the knowledge and the giving are part of it. They're part of it together. It's not like separate. Like, okay, today, honey, we're going to work on knowing each other, and tomorrow we'll work on giving to each other. It's like every time I give to you, I learn more about you, and you learn more about me. And I give to you, and I connect with you, and I become more part of you. It's like it's all intertwined. But these are the dynamics that are going into it. It's not a question of how good do I feel when I'm around you, right? Like, again, like, the songs that, oh, when he's around, my heart tinkles like bells and whatever else it is. Like, that's a lovely feeling, but that's not love. And that's not going to make a marriage work. It's not how I feel when I am around you. It's what are we building together and what value do we have on this?
Actually, you remind me of two stories. One was, so it's just funny how different families tick. So in the first year of marriage, when my wife would come home, on Friday, Erev Shabbos, as you're trying to get ready for Shabbat, before sunset, and you're trying to make sure that everything's in place. My wife would be coming back from work, and I was home earlier because I was in school. And so what I would do was I'd make sure that all the food is ready, because that's what my family's like, is the food ready? That's what's important. And then I would do that. I'd be like, wow, she's going to be so happy. Like, everything's all set up. This is going to be great. And she'd come home and she's like, the place isn't ready. Like, the place isn't clean. And I was like, but the food is ready. Like, that's what matters. Right. And then it took me perhaps a little too long to figure out, like, oh, she cares if the place is ready. So what I would do is, again, because I only had X amount of time. So then what I did was like, let me try something else. So then I cleaned up the place. The food was not ready. She came and she's like, wow. She's like, everything's ready. And I was like, the food isn't ready. She's like, it's okay. We can do that. I'm like, huh. Like, it clicked. But it's funny because I gave, like, what I valued is making sure the food is ready. That's what I cared about. But like, my wife cared about if the place was ready. Then once I made that, it was interesting because you're right. It was a giving, it was a knowledge, and those two things work together. That's a beautiful idea.
Right. When you know your wife better, your giving is more effective.
Right. But that's a really powerful idea. And I remember, just because this is so relevant, I'll try to keep this vague, but I was tutoring when I was in Dallas, and there was this girl I was tutoring she was in undergrad, and I tutored her for a while. It was like a year, maybe a year and a half. And at one of our later sessions, once I'd already gotten to know her to some degree, she seemed unusually tired. She's usually pretty sharp. She seemed really tired. I was like, hey, is everything okay? And so she's like, yeah, I was up really late last night until like 3 a.m. I was like talking to my ex-boyfriend. I was like, oh, like, I mean, how long? She's like, well, we were talking for 9 hours. Like, wow. I was like, man, that's a long conversation. I was like, what are you talking about? And she was saying, she's like, he wants to get back, like, how much I'm mean to him. And she said, oh, what did he say? And this is after I'd already like become a little more familiar with the Jewish approach. And she told me that he's like, like, you're perfect for me. Like, you make me so happy. And like, you're amazing for me. And I don't remember all the details. This is a long time ago, but I remember just kind of sitting back, and I was like, can I ask you a question? She's like, sure. She's like, did he say anything about what he can do for you? Like, how he can make you happy? How the reason why he wants to get back together is because he thinks he'd be perfect for you, and how he really understands you and wants to give to you, and like really feels like he completes you. And she's like, no. And it was funny because she was clearly so moved by like how she was perfect for him. And I was like, I think it's beautiful that he said it, because I could tell she was like being moved by him. And I was like, I think it's beautiful. And perhaps I was like overstepping my boundaries as a tutor, like just teach English, but I couldn't, like, I was still like on fire with these ideas. And I was like, wouldn't it be important for him to also be concerned about how good he is for you? It just sounds like he's more concerned about all the things that you can give to him and not all the things that he should give to you. And I think I confused her a little bit. And then like, we kind of moved on and just went back to the tutoring. But I want to be like, lady.
The fish story, right? There's this classic story of some rabbi. I looked it up. It's either the Kotzker Rebbe or Rav Lev Chasman, whoever. Okay, so there's a rabbi who sees one of his students like really chowing down on some fish at lunchtime. He goes up to him and is like, oh, you like fish? It's like, no, I love fish. It's like, you love fish? Uh-huh, right. You don't love fish. If you love the fish, you'd take the fish home, you give it a nice bed to sleep in, you'd make it some food, you take care of it, you go for a walk with it. You're eating the fish. You're cutting it open and destroying it. You don't love that fish. You love yourself. You like how you feel when you eat fish. That's the love of the Supremes and all the TV shows, is you like how you feel when you are with that person. It's exciting for you. You feel important. You feel attracted, whatever it is. That's how you feel. But again, that's not the same thing as loving somebody and caring. I want the best for you, and I want to give you, and I also want you to give to me, and I want this to be a synergy where we build something greater than ourselves. That's not, she's wonderful.
Going back to the movie now, that's probably, before I did a deeper dive into this, what I would have thought that whole Jack and Kay thing. Like, it's just so, like, I remember a few years ago, I actually did a deep dive on Titanic. I just watched like the iceberg, like, the iceberg scene when they hit it. And then I was like, whoa, this is like, again, because I was 10, I just didn't appreciate it. And then I just kept watching all like, the disaster scenes, and it was like, just scary. And I thought like the romance story is so dumb. Like, it was like, whatever, do they knew each other for 2 or 3 days. But then in preparing for this episode, I was like, let me just double check. Because I would have thought like, that's what the Jack and Kate wrote. It was just, they met each other. They were like infatuated with each other. They were, they're like, what, 17? She's 17. He's 20 or so. We never really know, but he's young. So, okay, it's like, like young love. It's just like kind of silly. But I want to push back because, and this is what people say, Jack was more than that for Kate. In terms of, you could say that Jack actually saw Kate for who she was. She was this young, upper class socialite who was stuck in this situation in terms of her father had died. He had left his family, like his wife and daughter, Kate, Kate Winslet, Rose, with Rose, with a lot of debts. And the way out of it was for Rose to, she got engaged to this guy, Cal, who was not a great guy. And her life was going to be relegated to being married to this guy to take her family out of these family debts. And she's not happy in this situation. She doesn't like it. And then along comes Jack, who is this kind of like lower class, free man who can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants to. And what's interesting is as you watch these scenes, he kind of like slowly allows her to be herself. She initially has these like knee-jerk reactions to what he says, like, "Oh, that's not proper. That's uncouth. That's that's rude. You're being so annoying." And he's just completely unfazed. He's like, "I'm just asking you a question." So she wants to throw herself off the boat, right? That's how they effectively first meet because she feels so constrained, like typical drama queen, 17-year-old. I don't know if that's a typical reaction to want to throw yourself off a boat, but so he meets her where she's at, and then afterwards, when they're talking on the deck, like later in the day when things are safe and calm, she says, "You probably just think I'm some spoiled rich girl." And he said, "No, that's not what I was thinking. What I was thinking was, what pushed you to like get to the point where you felt like that was your only way out?" And she feels seen. And you see throughout like, the rest of the movie, it's just him kind of taking her as she is and allowing her to be herself. So the question is like, that seems, unless you have pushback, is that the kind of knowledge we're talking about? It seemed like Jack saw Kate for who she was. He knew her in that way and then allowed herself to get to know herself.
Okay, I can't take it anymore. I can't take it over here. Can't take it. Look, Jack, based on this description, he's a good person. The fact that he's non-judgmental and open, it's wonderful. That doesn't mean that he knows her. He's open to, you could be whoever you want to be, right? Maybe he's a sensitive person. So he's like, oh, there's more here than just a prissy rich girl. Okay. That doesn't mean he knows her, right? Let me give you the scene. 30 years from now, they're married. Okay, they're married. He didn't die. They're married, and they're on the couch somewhere in New York. And she's complaining because he's going out to play with his friends again because he's a free spirit and he doesn't want to be held down by his wife. So he's going out to poker night and he's going to drink too much alcohol, which she's told him again and again not to do. Right, and he says she's too judgmental because she's still she grew up in a certain way and certain things are the way it's supposed to be. So she's rigid and judgmental. He's a loose, carefree. They don't know each other. There's lots of good things they both have. The fact that he sees in her and she appreciates his loose, free spirit, super. And that was a watershed moment for her, right? That people have lots of watershed moments in their lives. Some people meet a professor who opens their mind to a new way of seeing things. Do they go and marry that professor? It's a terrible idea. There certainly have been kind of abuses like that. That is not a long-term solution. That he did something wonderful for her, and for her to appreciate that and have changed her life based on that, it's great. That doesn't mean that they were in love, that this was a good idea for them to get married, that they should spend their lives together. None of that follows from the fact that she had a good experience being seen by somebody who has certain good qualities about him.
Yeah, that was pretty.
Mic drop. Boom.
Yeah, no, truth is, I'm not even sure what else how I can push back. I'm trying to think if I were, that makes sense to me, but I would say like, but couldn't you also say, that's not unusual for like a 20-year-old to, I think part of like what people feel saddened by the relationship is they were robbed of the opportunity. They didn't even have the chance to build that together. I agree.
I agree. That is sad. It would have been nice if they had the chance to learn about each other and see if they're a good fit and if they want to be. Again, I don't know that, I don't know the whole backstory of Jack, but here's a guy who's from the underclass and, grew up maybe without certain structures and values, whatever else it is. I don't know that he's great marriage material. Maybe he was. He seems to have certain good virtues about him, but like maybe she should check him out. Does he have a history of being deceptive and stealing things because he's used to that way of life? Does he have an alcohol problem? Does he think alcohol is a problem? I can't tell you how many couples I've seen where they disagree about how much alcohol is okay, and one of them is an alcoholic. There are problems that exist. Everybody has their issues, and you cannot look at somebody and say, oh, but this person doesn't have issues. I mean, obviously, that's ridiculous. Or to say, oh, but his issues don't bother me. It's not the way it works. You have to understand somebody. You have to get to know them. And then you have to accept that there will be things about them you don't like and work on that. It is not going to be a fairy tale. And it is a tragedy that they were robbed of this opportunity, but it doesn't mean that there was something there that was real that for sure they should have had and they lost. That does not mean that.
So people who defend Rose for kind of dreaming up Jack, people are like, oh, well, she was just talking about this. She had never spoken about before. Of course, she was thinking that. And how much Jack had meant to her. But I think just one point that people, I think, bring up is...
Let me give you a good defense of that moment.
Okay.
Right? Here's a very charitable interpretation of it. She can look back at that time and say, wow, that changed my life. I am where I am today because first of all, he saved my life. And second of all, he allowed me to see a bigger vision of the world. And so I have gratitude towards him and I appreciate what he did for me. But not necessarily, in this, final vision of her dying moments, maybe she is recalling that watershed moment in her life that made her who she is, but not Jack specifically. I think that's a fair way and a reasonable way to look at it. If, the writer or Rose or whoever would say back to me like, no, she really pined for Jack her whole life and wanted to kiss him, whatever, I would say, garbage. She has a life with a husband and friends and people that she met that are meaningful to her. And this guy was meaningful to her for what he gave to her and to her life. But she doesn't know she doesn't know him. She doesn't know his flaws. She doesn't know whether this guy was a moral person, was a calm person. She knows the barest details about him in one certain context, in one period of his life.
Right.
It's not a lifelong thing.
And to be fair, it was also for first 2 to 3 days and in a highly unusual situation where they're literally in a shipwreck. That doesn't happen every day. Again, the normal day-to-day things, especially once you have kids. But I guess one question I had was, again, there are two things I think that are going on here. First, there was that initial burst of chemistry that she had, which clearly worked out. And I liked what you said about the watershed moment. That's true. Some people do. I remember, I had those things with either certain books or certain mentors or whoever. I didn't fall in love with them. They completely changed the trajectory of my life. But that doesn't necessarily make for marriage material. It's important. Right. And it's interesting because those two things happened in one person. She both had extreme chemistry with this person, and he helped kind of give her that watershed moment, that clarity that she needed or was looking for. So that's true. But what's kind of sad is she was never able to kind of let the relationship play out for a year or two. And maybe things would have been great. Maybe they would have fizzled out.
Maybe.
She has no idea.
No idea.
My question is, the point is she was, and again, let's just take the situation the way I understood, in terms of she ends up at the end of her life dying and imagining herself going back to Jack. And there's this, how could she think that after being in a marriage for decades? I mean, presumably, if that's the kind of thing she was attracted to, this is me saying this, if that's the kind of thing she was attracted to, presumably she probably married a guy who embodied a lot of those virtues. I can't imagine her marrying a guy who's this boring, dull, completely unadventurous. There's nothing wrong with that, but clearly isn't what she's attracted to. So she would have probably found someone. So I think that's a side point. My question is, what happens if, and I suspect this probably happens sometimes, this idea of the one who got away. He was the one who got away. So you have a young Rose who's newly married for 5 years, 10 years, let's say even 20 years. She comes into Rabbi Bilek's office and starts talking about her marital problems by herself, not with her husband. And it's look, to be honest, there's this amazing guy when I was 17 years old who did this incredible thing for me. Literally Rose, who's and he died for me, and I've never been able to forget him. And he's the reason why I've done so much of what I've done now, and the reason why I am where I am now and not married to that horrible fiance of mine is because of him. And I can't stop thinking about him. I'm still in love with him. What would you say? What would you say to that?
I would say, boy, we should really rewrite the script, huh? I would say, look, that was a valuable thing you went through, and this person contributed something valuable to your life and to who you are. That person is gone, and we cannot sit stuck in the past. Whether it is somebody who you were romantically attracted to, or God forbid, a sibling, a parent, whatever it is, we take what those people gave us, and we mourn the tragedy and the loss, and we move on. People get into marriages, and God forbid somebody dies and they go to a second marriage. And the idea is not to forget what you got from that or forget who that person was, but to, draw a line like that's the end of this relationship. And now here's a new relationship. And I will try to bring the person I am now to that relationship and make this the best one I can. If you're not happy in your relationship, we can work to make that better. The answer is not to go pining for this person who's not available. Right? A more modern and maybe common example is someone thinking about someone who is still alive, and like, maybe I should find my ex-boyfriend or this, the one that got away. Like, that's not necessarily the solution, right? Especially if you knew them for a short time and it was just this passionate, exciting thing. You don't know what was there. You feel this tremendous emotional conviction, but you just don't know, right? If you're married to somebody who's lousy and abusive and addicted, like, okay, but that stands on its own merit. If this is a good, solid marriage and it's got problems, let's work on it. Let's make it better. Let's make it what you want it to be. Let's not throw it out looking for something that is a fantasy that could have been better. The push, you're trying to figure out, like, what's the pushback? And the pushback somebody will say is, but I really knew. I really, like, in that moment, whatever you say, I knew this was a person for me. And the answer is that emotions are just simply not a good guide to how to live the rest of our life. You can't know, because whatever that feeling is, unless you believe in some kind of mystical force where, if you have that feeling, then it must mean that everything else is going to be good. That certainly doesn't not what the Torah believes. And, maybe there's some mystical system like that, but you just don't know who that person is and what they're like. And that feeling of conviction, it is so common. We've all been there, especially when we're teenagers. We think that we know everything and we're dead sure of it. I mean, I have several teenagers right now, and the extent of their certainty is only outweighed by the extent of their completely not knowing anything. Nobody is more sure, no one is more wrong than a teenager who says, no, I know I'm right. So the fact that you felt that in that moment, that feeling is not the same thing as actually knowing. And it's hard to accept that, and you may not want to accept that. But that feeling of excitement and thrill and passion and connection is not a good guide to what to do with the rest of your life.
That's powerful. I mean, I do know, I guess there's like almost like a concluding note. There's a verse that I know has like been said to me that when, Avram Avinu, Abraham, was looking for a shidduch, for a wife for his son, Isaac. And at the end of that Torah portion, Rebecca is brought back, Rivka is brought back, they get married. And it's interesting because if you look at the words, like in order of how it works in terms of Isaac married Rivka and he loved her. And then he loved her. And I remember people are like, first comes the marriage, and then only after, I guess, like the marriage happens. Obviously, it's not like you're married and now you fall in love. That's obviously not that is not the point of the verse. The point of the verse is first you get married, whatever, you commit to a relationship, and only over time will that marriage grow. Will that love grow? First you commit, and then the love grows. And that seems very much in line with what you're saying. This is a powerful lesson, I think, for those of us out there who are wondering about this, because this is, again, it's like very, very hotly contested issue, like trying to justify Rose's fantasy. Others who are people who are attacking Rose's fantasy at the end, people who are defending it. I guess in conclusion, can we sum up hang on, before we actually sum up the ideas, in conclusion, are there any ideas that you felt like we should have addressed that we didn't? Any last thoughts before we sign off?
I think we covered the main points. We could talk about this for a long time. But I think the basic idea that there's more to love than just how you feel in that moment, that knowledge is an important component of that giving is a long-term process that builds this. I think those are important ideas. I think we sort of covered that basic landscape.
Powerful. And then can we just do, this was a request and we've done it the past few episodes and it's been well received. Can you just can we sum up the main points that we addressed in this podcast just succinctly, maybe like 1 or 2 minutes?
Let's do it. Love at first sight is not a thing. There's a feeling, it's a real emotion, but it's not love in the sense that this is what you should do with the rest of your life. Rather, love is something that you build, something that you develop consciously. And to do that, you want to make sure that you are leading with your head and not your heart. So you know the person, you understand who they are, and you continue to learn more about them in order to develop the love. You give to each other so that you deepen your identification with each other. And you become one unit, one flesh, as the verse says. And you're building something bigger than yourselves. You leave where you came from and you create something new together. And that is a long-term project that two people come together to do in marriage.
Beautiful. That's very well summarized. Rabbi Bilek, it's a pleasure to have you on. And again, thank you for joining us.
Good times, Ophir. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to the Dilemmas on Screen, a Jewish Perspective podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. If you have any suggestions for a moral dilemma you'd like analyzed, feel free to send it over. Thanks again, and see you next time.